Oh, no!
Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. This is another episode of The Next Level. And I'd like to first start by saying that this month is the 3rd year anniversary of the launch of the show, of The Wedding Biz. And I've had such a blast bringing these stories to life of these iconic wedding and event professionals and helping to educate and inspire. But it also comes at a cost to me. And I've occasionally received comments asking how people can give back and support the show. And it turns out there's a community-driven site where people can support creatives in delivering great content. And starting for a small monthly amount of around $6 a month, you can lend support to not only help you stay engaged with our industry's thought leaders, but also to expand on the kinds of content the Wedding Biz delivers. So please go to theweddingbiz.com where you will find a link to become a patron and support the show. Again, theweddingbiz.com or the show notes. You'll see that link to become a patron. And thank you so much. So before I introduce today's guest co-host, I do want to mention last week's interview was with Steve Kimball, wonderful planner, designer out of Dallas, Texas, who works worldwide, very charismatic guy. And I had Julie Novak from Party Slate as the guest co-host on The Next Level. So that was a great week of interviews. So today's guest co-host is Sean Lowe. Hey, Sean, welcome again to the show.
Hey, always so excited.
Yeah, I love having you on. And if anyone doesn't know, Sean's consulting firm, The Business of Being Creative, is focused on providing practical advice to those in the business of being creative. His client list includes the who's who of the wedding industry and design community. And we have a big announcement, right, Sean?
We do.
I am officially launching a network called the Wedding Biz Network, in which I produce podcasts for other people in the event industry. And Sean is our first member of the network. And so his show is going to be coming out within a week or two. I'm so excited, Sean, I heard your introduction, your welcome episode, which we're going to be releasing soon. I thought it was wonderful. I can't wait for this.
Me neither.
So today's guest who we're speaking about, who was interviewed on Monday, is Bill Baker, a wonderful consultant who says that behind every leader, brand, strategy, idea, or initiative, there's a story. And Bill teaches us how to make those stories strategic and come to life. And so, Sean, it's interesting. One of the first parts of the interview, I asked him what his definition of storytelling is. And he said it's an exchange of meaning shared between people, basically a way for people to share ideas, experiences, emotions, thoughts, and meaning from one person to another and for a purpose. And his whole point in terms of what he does and what we can do is that it's about storytelling, but with objectives and goals in order to have an impact with influence and a desired goal in mind. That's what this is all about.
No question. And I've known Bill. I've never actually met him in person, but we've known each other and through social media, actually, right, for a long time. And I followed his career and what he does and for a long time, and he is mine. And so I really do appreciate all that he comes to when he says the power of story strategically and using story not to manipulate, but just to motivate, right? And to inspire. Because what do we connect to is that sense of culture, right? That sense of community, right? That we can relate to that story in a way that inspires us to say, oh, okay, I can be part of this story too, in my own way. And I think that that's what he's brilliant at teaching and talks about it so well in his interview.
Yeah. And he was also saying, there's a lot of scientific research that shows that we remember stories. And so when someone shares a story, it engages our brain in different ways that allows us to become more of a sponge to soak it all in. And so, whether it's us in the event industry or anywhere else, companies, people, that we really first want to figure out our vision statement, our mission statement, and organizational values. I mean, that's within the company. But as far as for people in the event industry, I think there was an example he shared that, it really starts, and we know this, but not necessarily with the intention he's talking about. It starts with the very beginning, that we should be telling the story beginning with the save the date. And we can tell the story of our couples and our, nonprofits, whatever it is that we're covering. But it's also about the guest, right? It's almost. Do you remember when he framed it? He was saying that It's almost like telling the story of, for the guests, say there's two guests who don't know they don't know anyone. And what is it that happens to them over the course of that evening or that weekend? I just love how he framed it that way for us to understand.
Well, like any great storyteller and any great way of storying story is the basis of so much art, right? And how we bring somebody into that so that they feel included, right? Whether you're listening to, your world is specific to it, right? How do you bring someone into entertainment so that they feel immersed in it?
Right.
So that they feel connected. And even though, for me, that's what sitting in a dark theater together with, 100 strangers is why we miss it so much these days. And why when we go to a concert, right? You don't know anybody. Maybe a group of people, but if there's 1,000 people in the audience, the chance that 999 of them doesn't exist, right? So what he's talking about is how do you use the power of story to connect us all and to have a shared experience that we can all then be part of and therefore be moved by, even though we don't have any relationship to each other and may very well be leading much different lives, right? But in that moment, in that series of moments, you are able to connect and be part of something bigger, and then be moved by it regardless of who you are. The only choice is are you part of the audience or not? But the audience is already defined, and so then it's your choice to bring everybody together. And story is what he's talking about how to do that, right? That's what I love so much about it.
Yeah, and also to express our brand, right? Yeah. And our business and to make sure that everyone on our team and our creative partners who we work with understand it as well. And, he talked about defining the pillars of our brand through storytelling.
Yep.
So intention.
Yeah, intention is there, but for me, it's also about, and it's what's interesting that what he didn't talk about and what is implicit in everything that he's saying though. And so he's kind of showing the resolution of it. He's not necessarily talking about the actual word, but what he's talking about when he says about brands and the pillars of a brand and building everything like that, he's talking about how a brand holds and resolves tension. Right? Because that's the essence of story, right? Is how do you hold, oh my God, is this wedding going to come out? Is the cake going to be beautiful? Is the decor going to be beautiful? Is the entertainment going to be, what's it going to be like? Are the pictures going to be fantastic, right? That uncertainty of how the next thing is going to evolve, right? In terms of maybe the grand gesture, is the wedding beautiful or not? Or in the next moment is, I hope they play this song next, right? And so it can be, tension is what that brand is going to be reliant on, and everyone involved in that story in resolving that tension in a unified voice is really what Bill is talking about, right? And in order for that to happen, story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. And that's also what he's talking about, right? Is how does it evolve into something that we ultimately resolves in a way that the storyteller wanted, right? For you to feel a particular way once that tension is done. And that's actually the essence of building a brand, right? Is what by his eyes. And I love that.
Yes. He also articulated, especially for us as companies, how to uncover the story of our brand and to articulate it. Mm-hmm. He was talking about strategy, which you're also implying there too, about why are we telling it? What is the impact that we want? Therefore, what is the right story that meets those requirements? And the messaging, what do we want the people listening to take away? And what is the action that we want them to take as a result of hearing that story?
Right.
He was saying you got to define the strategy, define the messages, and then find a story that motivates the action we want as a result of all of that.
Yeah. And I think that's where the essence of it's going to be. And then how to make it personal, right? And then how do you make it, I actually really don't like the word, but it's how do you make it human, right? How do you bring in, the humanity in it all? The humanity I love. Making it human isn't humanity, right? Humanity is about relationship, right? Making it human is, giving a voice to a corporation or a business is something different. But the humanity of it is what draws us in with a great story.
Yeah, we're talking about emotions, right? That's what pulls us in.
Yeah, relationship. And so, what he's also saying is that to have humanity, you first have to be human, right? And that's so if you kind of see the strategy and structure he's saying is that, right? Is the idea, which I love and how he expresses it. First, you have to create the ethos of what we will relate to. And then you have to get into this place of, okay, how will we then touch the relationship in a meaningful way? You can't do one without the other. And you certainly you can't become involved in a relationship until you understand your very humanness as a company, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was interesting how he framed all of that. And again, it's all about being effective, right? What do we want to get across through this? It's interesting too. One example of it, I was asking him about presentations, and do we work this into presentations as well? And he basically was saying, well, of course. I mean, in order to shape the way that we want the audience to think and to feel about what we're talking about, he was suggesting, and again, I think this ties together a lot of what you're talking about. Even then, bring in the humanity, start with a story to shape how they're going to feel, to pave the way, set the stage, and pepper it throughout, and always close, he said, with one last inspiring story. And it seems whether it's a presentation or not, the point is that we need to be aware. And because I think about this, even though all of this made sense to me, he really helped clarify it in a way I hadn't thought about before. When I then think back to my presentations, whether it's at a conference or it's with a client, in order to get the business, I think I'm sometimes telling stories and sometimes I'm not. And again, he's talking about having way more intention to it, really thinking this out. That's why I think this whole interview was so interesting.
Well, yeah. And it's so nuanced and subtle because some stories are meant to do what I've been talking about up till now. And some stories are just meant to inspire, be an anecdote, right? And make you frame how you feel about the business. And I think that if you listen to Bill, you'll hear that they're both. And I think most people make the mistake of thinking that the story is somehow ephemeral to shape how you see somebody, right? And what you miss is that if you don't connect the two, if you really are not kind of paying attention to what Bill is saying, is that you actually have to do both. So let me land that. If you're saying, well, let me tell you a story about how I was the hero, right? What we did and how we were, and we worked so hard, and that you get to be seen in a particular light. That is actually not going to necessarily draw somebody into being part of that story with you, because you were just the hero in that story and they can't relate to it. But then if you can tell another story about how a person in front of you might really relate to that, even if they're not in the same existence, right? In the way that they live their lives, but simply that they relate and have empathy to what you're about to share with them as another story, right? Which is going to draw them into, oh, I want to take this journey with you, right? I want to be there with you. So one story was to simply inspire and get, this is what we stand for as a brand. And the other one is to, wow, I really want to get in there with you. I really want to see how you're the kind of person that I want on my team. Those are two separate stories, right? And so hearing that difference and knowing that difference is incredibly important. And they are both very, very useful tools. You just have to know which story you're telling and when.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, that is all we have time for today. Really appreciate your thoughts on this, Sean. And again, congratulations on the show that you're about to launch.
Oh, so excited.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to be announcing and keeping everybody in touch with when it comes out. So as far as today's story about Bill Baker, be sure to check out his site. It is at bbcostorytelling.com. That's bbcostorytelling.com, where you can find all kinds of information to help you learn about becoming a better storyteller. On social media platforms for LinkedIn, you could find him at Storyteller Bill Baker. Again, on LinkedIn, Storyteller Bill Baker. And on Twitter and his YouTube channel, which I urge everyone to check out, it is Storyteller Bill. All of this is in the show notes at theweddingbiz.com or on your cell phone podcast app. And also for Sean, to get more information on Sean, go to thebusinessofbeingcreative.com. Again, that's thebusinessofbeingcreative.com. And then on Instagram, I believe your handle is at SeanLowe1, the numeral 1.
Yep.
Be sure to also follow us on Instagram in particular and Facebook, but especially Instagram at The Wedding Biz. We would love for you to subscribe to the show. It's free. You'll get notifications when new episodes come out. And finally, we want to thank our sponsor for today, and that's the Music Makers podcast. The Music Makers is behind-the-scenes stories from the most influential music industry pros around, including artists, recording producers, songwriters, recording engineers, managers, record industry executives, and more. So check out the Music Makers podcast, and we'll catch you next week on the Wedding Biz.